Have you ever stopped to think that we may be living through the last months of humanity as we know it? That 2025 could be the year that changes everything, literally everything on the face of the earth. What you're about to discover may make you completely rethink your plans for next year, because two of the greatest seers in human history made predictions about 2025. So disturbing that even the most fervent skeptics are starting to worry. I'm talking about Nostradamus, the French prophet who foresaw events like the rise of Hitler, the September 11th attacks, and the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Bulgarian seer known as Nostradamus of the Balkans, who got right the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the attacks on the Twin Towers, and the death of Princess Diana. When these two visionary minds converge in their predictions for the same year, we'd better pay attention. Hello, my name is Ran Santos, and what you're about to hear may be the most haunting script I've ever narrated on this, because if these predictions are right, 2025 won't just be another year on the calendar, but the beginning of the end of everything we know. Let's start with the most terrifying prediction of all. In her mystical visions, Baba Vanga declared that 2025 would mark nothing less than the beginning of humanity's extinction. Yes, you heard that right, extinction. According to the Bulgarian sea, an intense conflict in Europe would be responsible for decimating a larger portion of the world's population. Of course it does. The war between Russia and Ukraine has already lasted more than 2 years, and political analysts warn that the conflict could expand dramatically in 2025, involving other European nations and even world powers. What began as a regional war could become the spark for something much bigger and more destructive, and it doesn't stop there. Nostradamus also made predictions about several armed conflicts emerging in Europe in 2025, which only reinforces Baba Vanga's warning. Coincidence? Maybe. The seer also pointed out that Russia would play a key role in all of this, leading to the complete devastation of the European continent. But if you thought wars were the worst of our problems, get ready. Both Baba Vanga and Nostradamus warned about the emergence of a deadly disease in the same year, a new pandemic that could be even more devastating than COVID-19. Imagine a disease with a high mortality rate spreading amid the chaos of a third world war. It's a scenario none of us wants to live through. Now, here's an interesting twist. Among Baba Vanga's predictions for 2025, there's one that completely diverges from chaos and destruction. She claimed that beings from other planets would finally visit Earth, and not in the discreet, mysterious way we see in science fiction. It wouldn't be hidden. The entire world population would know without a shadow of a doubt that we are not alone in the universe. This direct and unprecedented contact could turn the world upside down. Imagine our beliefs, our science, and even our way of life being totally questioned. After all, science has not yet been able to prevent the existence of life beyond Earth, but with extraterrestrials knocking at our door, denial would be impossible. Baba Vanga also said that these beings will be far more advanced than we are, both technologically and spiritually. This visit could be the push humanity needs to evolve, radically change its way of life, and perhaps even find a solution to prevent our own extinction. Could aliens be the key to saving the human race? Still on the subject of Russia, Baba Vanga made a bombshell prediction for 2025. She said that Vladimir Putin would be assassinated, and not by an enemy country, but by a The motives for this crime could be tied to a desperate attempt to promote acts of fire and end the conflicts. According to the seer, this act would not bring peace. On the contrary, the global diplomatic situation could worsen even further, leaving the world at a level of instability we can hardly imagine. And as if that weren't enough to keep us up at night, Baba Vanga continues with her predictions, assuring that 2025 would also be the year some country would launch a bio. The problem is that she didn't reveal which nation would be responsible for the attack or who the victim would be. With political assassinations and biological weapons on the horizon, the future looks like a script worthy of a post-apocalyptic film. One of Nostradamus' most intriguing predictions is that the red adversary will be frightened, putting the great ocean in danger. Historically speaking, Russia was known for years as the red enemy duetto, its past as the Soviet Union, and of course, even today it remains one of the major concerns of some West. However, it's important to remember that China, currently under a socialist regime, also has red as its national symbol. Led by the Communist Party, the country's economy has been growing above the global average, as has its influence over other nations to the point of clashing with the United States in several fronts. Are they the new Baba Vanga stated that communism would return to the center of debate by 2076, and perhaps that movement begins now in 2025. Many scholars claim that the victory of Donald Trump in the elections was predicted by Nostradamus when he declared that in 2025 a giant would face troubles, but that this would be the ideal scenario for major changes. That giant would be the United States. But where does Trump fit into this tree? Researchers link this passage to a biblical quotation cited by the prophet saying that a powerful, controversial, and highly influentiality would face intense opposition yet remain in power. It doesn't speak directly about Trump, but it's hard not to associate the descriptions with the president who will take office next year. However, he must be very careful, because there is also a passage warning that this leader would be killed by a rival country. That's not hard to believe. After all, even before the elections, Trump survived an almost fatal attack in his own country. One of the most curious passages by Nostradamus speaks of a certain celestial fire that will occur on another planet and mentions that Mars would experience a darkening of its light. Clearly, none of this is very clear, but those who study the prophet's writings claim it has to do with the colonization of Mars that Elon Musk intends to undertake in the coming years. The meaning of these phrases is still debated. In 2025, Mars will be a hot topic since both the billionaire and NASA have projects to advance the mission of sending people to live on the red planet, something that could materialize by 2050. Now, what would this celestial fire be, and why would Mars's light darken? I suppose we'll have to live through 2025 to find out what Nostradamus meant. King Charles III has just ascended the throne after the death of Queen Elizabeth, who reigned for 70 years. However, according to a Nostradamus expert named Mario Reed, a passage indicates that in 2025, the King of the Isles will be forcibly expelled and will be replaced by someone who will not bear the mark of a king. The scholar claims that Elizabeth was the last monarch who truly came from a lineage in which the royal family's values still remained intact, and that her successors will put an end to the tradition of kings and queens in England, with Charles being the starting point for this. Mario reading also states that Charles will not last long, either due to health complications or an unexpected shift in public opinion. A Buddhist personal librarian, Nostradamus, released several passages that would make life in 2025 more complicated, who wrote that this would be a year of intensified conflicts, the emergence of naval wars, and increasingly frequent humanitarian disasters. Even so, the French astrologer predicted that most of the suffering humanity will face will have nothing to do with wars, but with nature, something many interpret as the climate change that has been occurring with increasing intensity in recent. It's a fact that natural disasters are becoming ever more destructive. However, Nostradamus points out that weather phenomena with the capacity to threaten human survival will occur next year. Now comes one of the most disturbing. The price of wheat will rise so high that man will eat his. This is truly one of Nostradamus' worst predictions for 2025. The phrase is shocking, but hold on. It doesn't mean we will literally become a cat. What experts suggest is that Nostradamus foresaw such an absurd rise in food prices that the situation would become unsustainable. Imagine the price of bread, rice, and staple goods soaring so much that many people simply wouldn't able to put food on the table. When hunger spreads, despair takes over. People who would never consider committing crimes could be pushed to thieves, stealing from neighbors, breaking into homes in search of anything to eat, or even fighting over. This chaos wouldn't only affect those already living in vulnerable. Even people considered good, who have always respected laws and values, could lose control when survival is at stake. Moral limits become more free. The scenario is worthy of a total social collapse. Empty supermarkets, mass looting, streets gripped by fear, and the sense that every man for himself has become the only rule. It's one of those predictions who work with all our strength is wrong. Because living in a world where even your neighbor becomes a threat is truly the beginning of the end for humanity. Even if everything goes well here on Earth, we would still have to worry about what comes from the outside. Since it, French seer also predicted that the planet could be hit by an asteroid at the turn of the year. He wrote that in the sky fire would be seen and a long trail of sparks, interpreted by his biographers as a prediction of some celestial object heading toward Earth. Without prior warning, at the end of 2024,